I love to say it can happen in our lifetime, if not, sooner than that. And it may well. I mean, it may well. We see throughout history that there are things that seemingly nobody's paying attention to happen gradually, but then all of a sudden it just takes this all of a sudden overnight mass adoption crisis. We saw COVID. What happened? It just kind of flipped. All of a sudden now we're doing these podcasts now on opposite sides of the world, on Zoom and Riverside and things like that. Like 5-6 years ago, we never really would have thought about doing that. We were still, it was still a really new thing. And so, I think with the adoption of Bitcoin and the fact that we're on that trajectory that is very similar to, I've seen these charts and these graphs that show that, we're still at 3 to 5% global adoption in Bitcoin. And when you compare that to, say, the iPhone or, the internet, I think that, and I know there's others that have kind of said this, I feel like we're kind of at that 1999, 1999 time frame in terms of where we are on the Bitcoin adoption curve, which basically means that was 25, 26 years ago. And so maybe it takes that amount of time. But I think the whole thing that can accelerate this is a flight to safety. I really believe that if we have another pandemic, or we have a world war, or we have CBDCs rolling out, and maybe Europe's going to be the test bed for this, with this $10 trillion strategic reallocation, which essentially means that they're going to be seizing, savings from the people. If all of that really happens, I just think it's going to wake a lot of people up. Now, the big challenge is going to be, how do people access their money, right? Because, we're already seeing here in Australia that, getting your money in some cases out of the country onto Bitcoin exchanges, withdrawing cash from a bank, all of these things are all of a sudden becoming more challenging. And, even with that, and it's not just in the Bitcoin ecosystem that we're hearing about these things, we're actually hearing about them on talkback radio shows and, on the mainstream news. And yet it would seem that most people are still asleep at the wheel. So I think we're going to transition into a parallel economy first. I think that it's already happening. I think that people who can exchange value and accept Satoshis for their services, I think we're going to see that more and more when you have applications like Zapright and Square that enable that. I just think this is what's going to happen, and it's not going to be noticed. It's not going to be mainstream. It's just going to be one of those things that people start to pick up on. And then we're going to have a crisis moment where people opt out. And I don't know where that's going to be, Brandon. I mean, if you had said to me in 2019 that, next year we're going to have this thing and we're going to have to stand 6 feet apart and put nappies on our faces and rub this shit on our hands before we can go to the supermarket and all this stuff, like, I would have said you're crazy. So we know these things can and do happen, and maybe there's another one coming, but there's people in this space that are a lot more tuned into monetary history, the life cycle of fiat currencies, the inner workings of these central banks and what's going on, that are probably better equipped to answer when this transition is likely to be. But for me, it's all about opting out sooner rather than later, starting to transact in Bitcoin as much as you possibly can. In Australia, that's difficult right now because, the powers that be that run this country, they are just absolutely have their head in the sand when it comes to this asset class. But that doesn't mean that, we still can't function peer to peer globally, and and do it in that way. But fun times ahead, man. Fun times ahead.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And the beauty of Bitcoin is, like the American founding. I talk a lot about the American founding and with the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, what it gave people, at least inside the walls of America. Now we have, to a large extent, outside of the rest of the world now with Bitcoin. If you own Bitcoin, you now have private property. You now have these rights that no one can take away from you. And these things that just have never, humans have not just or not used to. I mean, like, let's be frank with it. I mean, this is something very radical and very different that is upon people. And so I think that that's what's going to be fascinating as people start really becoming educated on this. Do you think, and I'm going to segue a little bit to back to price to a degree here. Do you think we have any price suppression going on? Like, do you suspect there's any? It's weird saying at 100,000 US dollars, but I know there's many people in the space that think that there's funny games being played. And maybe the better question is not necessarily like, do you think there is or not, but we saw what happened with FTX, Celsius, Terra Luna, a bunch of these. If you FAFO, if you F around, you find out. Is that kind of going back to like Bitcoin trains you? It doesn't, you don't change Bitcoin changes you. Is this going to happen in your mind going forward? We're going to see more of these blowups maybe as things go up and down, but it's going to train society that, hey, you can't mess around with this long term. You can play around a little bit, but you're going to get burned at some point. Do you see that kind of just continually playing out as people learn, as society learns what this asset class is?
Yeah, I do. I mean, unfortunately, people love to gamble, as we know, and people are being forced, kind of, in some respects, down this path because they know that they need to do something, and in order to keep up, because everybody knows intuitively that things aren't right. Everybody. I defy anyone to kind of suggest that even people who have done exceptionally well over the last 5 years during this hyperinflationary period, where we've seen where we live, some of the real estate prices around here have just been absolutely crazy. Like, people have like tripled and quadrupled their money in the last 5 years, and I mean, we live in a beachside area, so it's highly kind of desirable in that sense. But even those people, they've got to know that things aren't right. And even when you create a division, they might be doing okay, but the reality is they have family members or kids or relatives that they can see are being affected by this inflationary system. And so, I think that as people start to realize what Bitcoin is, and the fact that you can get exposure to Bitcoin through an ETF or through buying MicroStrategy, or you can sort of play funny games with lending platforms, and you can say, well, I'm better off buying a cryptocurrency because it's more likely to 10x in the next 12 months than Bitcoin is. All of these things that people have to rationalize with and deal with in their mind, who are entering this space. It's tough, because it's there's a lot to take in. People have to do the work on Bitcoin to realize that it's really a safe haven, because when you do it right, because it's not just about exposure to Bitcoin. Like, I get a lot of people saying to me, oh, look, I don't really want the complexity of having to worry about being a custodian for the asset or setting up collaborative custody. And they say, well, what do you recommend? Should I just get exposure to the ETF? And, I think that if all you're here for is number go up, and you genuinely are fearful or not prepared to put in the time to actually learn how to do this next step, which is the sovereignty side of it, then go ahead. I mean, we know that Bitcoin is the fastest horse in the race, and so if that's all you care about, then go for it. But, I just encourage everybody to not just come here for number go up. Try to stay away from all of this noise. And I know at the Bitcoin conference last week, I was watching some of the clips, and it's all so much about stable coins and, all of that is for me, it's just noise.
And stable coins. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but unfortunately, it's what people see, it's what they hear, and it creates just all of this narrative and confusion, and for new people entering the space in particular, I think it's really hard for them to kind of be able to put all that to the side and just focus on what really matters, and that is to acquire this asset as quickly as you can and to put it into self-custody. And so, look, for me, all of that it's just noise. I don't, like I said, I have an ear to the ground, but I don't pay too much attention to all of it, because I think it's a distraction from what the average person should really be doing. And that is learning about Bitcoin, growing your knowledge, growing your conviction, allocating to Bitcoin in a meaningful way as quickly as you can, and being here not just for number go up, but being here for the freedom technology. So that's how I see it, man.
I would love for you to unpack this just for a minute in the importance of, because I know you are a big advocate of self-custody and getting your coins off exchanges. We talked about this earlier with the California. Again, I'm not an expert in California politics or anything by any means, but it was just something about if it's been there for 3 years and you don't have it off exchanges, they're going to take it. I heard some people call them BS on that, whatever. But moral of the story is, whether it's a 6102 style event here in America, that's happened before, not even 100 years ago, the government taking gold, whatever it may be. All these things have happened in history. So I'd love for you to touch on the importance of self-custody and really the innovation that is. So I know it's something that you are a big advocate of. So I'd love for you to just talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. So when I think of Bitcoin, it promises two things. It promises, and this is if you do it right, okay? It promises wealth acceleration because it's mathematically engineered to go up forever, because we know it's finite, absolutely scarce. That's the first promise. The second promise, and this is where most people miss it, is where most people fall down. The second promise is wealth protection. And we live in a world now where wealth protection is becoming not just more important, but I believe critical for everybody. Not just the average person, but even high net worth people. And we're seeing attacks now on superannuation in this country. We had some cyber attack stuff go on with some big industry super funds just maybe 2 months ago, and then that was closely followed by this announcement that this new or this incumbent government is going to bring in a new tax program on retirement accounts. And so they're going to bring in unrealized gains. And so people have done everything that they've been told to do their whole life, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, saving into these retirement accounts, because the government set up a program about 40 odd years ago in this country to basically let everyone know that, look, we can't guarantee the pension's going to be there when you get to retirement age, so we want you to save for your own retirement. And now they want to tax those retirement savings on a number that they say is what the value of that asset is every single year. And even though you haven't realized that gain, they want to put their hand into your retirement account to take their pound of flesh. And so how all of this ties into self-custody is because so many people don't realize that when they had their assets in this centralized system, the financial planning industry, their accountants with brokers, on these exchanges, all of these things, they're exposed to that central control system, the counterparty, the risk of capital controls. If we ever have another crisis situation, which everybody should be rationalizing that it's very, very possible, particularly in this geopolitical, this uncertain economic world that we live in. I mean, nobody can be honest with themselves and say everything's stable. I mean, we know that something could happen tomorrow and, they could close access to the banking system. Financial markets could shut down tomorrow. There's a whole bunch of things that could happen that could really shake up people's lives. And so this is the reason why I'm a huge believer that self-custody is the ultimate solution, because being in control of your money with no counterparty risk and being able to be portable with that asset, so that if you had to go to a better jurisdiction, if you had to, leave an untenable situation that was going in your country and you had to go overnight, things like that, you can't divest yourself from traditional assets in a hurry if you need to do those kinds of things. And I know this is an extreme situation, but we just have to understand that it's incumbent on us, if we care about our future and being very conscious of where things are going, to actually take these proactive steps to protect, if not all, then some meaningful portion of our financial lives. And the only way you can do that is with self-custody, because you don't rely on any other individual in order to do that. So I'm big on encouraging people to set themselves up with cold storage, air-gapped Bitcoin-only wallets, open source, those kinds of things. There's a handful of devices on the market that are brilliant in that regard. And, a lot of people just aren't aware of that, Brandon. They've done step one, which is make a choice to get involved in this asset. But unfortunately, they're falling down with step two, which is to actually get that asset into their hands so that they own the private keys, not the exchange. And the more people who take that step, the better off they're going to be. Because, if the worst case scenario happens and they need to skip town, or they need access to their bank account or their finances, and there's capital controls in the system and they can't access their money, well, life's good because you have access to your money in the form of self-custody. So it's a big deal, man. It's a big deal. And unfortunately, a lot of people aren't really doing the work on that step, because I think we've become very complacent and used to the fact that we can go to the ATM and get our money, or we can go down to the bank and, withdraw, or get online and do a transfer. But we have to understand that, be it Cyprus in 2013 or in Lebanon in 2019, these things can turn bad very, very quickly. And we even saw in your country, in 2022 or 23 with the Silicon Valley banks there, and that should have been a wake-up call. So exchanges, FTX, Celsius, people who unfortunately entrusted these exchanges to custody their wealth, their Bitcoin, look what happened. So I think it's a message that needs to really be advocated a lot more than currently is being done in the Bitcoin space, and that's what I really focus on when I'm talking to people.
If you like that clip, then you definitely got to check out this next spicy clip. I think you're really going to like it. Come on, check it out. But if you want the full version, the full interview, then check that out over here. Come on, do it. I'll see you in there.